From the outside, they look like the perfect American family. From the crisp family photos on mahogany desks to the yearly Christmas cards featuring matching sweaters, the Mitchells were the embodiment of East Coast success. But only one of them had learned to live behind that facade, hiding not just who he loved, but who he truly was. His name was Ethan Mitchell. While his cousins Blake and Madison climbed corporate ladders, drove luxury vehicles, and dated people who appeared in society pages, Ethan graded papers at a second-hand desk in his modest Boston apartment, checking for historical accuracies and essays about the Civil War. The distance between them wasn't measured in miles, but in expectations. Ethan's grandfather, William Mitchell, had built Mitchell Technologies from nothing after returning from Vietnam. A man of steel resolve and traditional values, he'd turned military technology into a billion-dollar empire. Everyone wanted their piece of the Mitchell kingdom. Everyone except Ethan. The morning of the funeral, rain pounded against the windows of Ethan's South End apartment. The ceiling had a water stain shaped vaguely like Texas. His partner James slept peacefully beside him, unaware that today would change everything. "You sure you don't want me there?" James asked, his artist's hands gentle on Ethan's shoulders as he straightened the borrowed tie. The question hung between them, loaded with years of family dinners where Ethan arrived alone, Christmas gatherings where his roommate was never invited. "They don't deserve to meet you," Ethan replied, the words familiar on his tongue. What he didn't say: they don't deserve to judge you. The family hadn't openly rejected him when he came out 6 years ago. The Mitchell way was colder gradual exclusion, conversations that stopped when he entered rooms, invitations that specified no plus ones. Only his mother Sarah, who worked double shifts as a nurse after his father's death, had stood firmly beside him, and strangely, his grandfather William, who'd continued their Sunday chess matches without commentary, those piercing blue eyes evaluating moves while the rest of the family withdrew. "What's your favorite memory of him?" James asked, handing Ethan his worn messenger bag. Ethan closed his eyes, remembering his high school play A Midsummer Night's Dream. He'd scanned the audience, finding not his uncle or cousins, but William Mitchell sitting alone in the back row. He'd never mentioned coming. They never spoke of it, but he was there. The Mitchell estate loomed against steel gray skies, a monument to success that felt more like a mausoleum. Inside, Blake stood surrounded by executives, already practicing his CEO voice. Madison posed for subtle social media shots beside priceless art. Uncle Richard and Aunt Linda spoke in hushed tones with the family lawyer. When the will reading began, the room became a theater of greed. Blake received the company shares. Madison got the Manhattan penthouse. Richard and Linda claimed the Hamptons estate. Then the lawyer turned to Ethan, his expression unreadable. "And to my grandson, Ethan Mitchell, I leave this," a simple white envelope. Inside, a one-way plane ticket to San Francisco, a business card with Chronicle Building, 3 p.m., June 15th, written on the back, and a single antique key. The room erupted in laughter. "A coach ticket," Blake snickered, examining it over Ethan's shoulder. "To California, grandfather must have really wanted you far away." Linda's whisper carried intentionally. William wouldn't want his money falling into the hands of people like him. But something in the weight of that key felt significant. The last words William had spoken to him echoed. "The most powerful moves are the ones your opponent never sees coming." That night, staring at the ticket while James slept beside him, Ethan made his decision. Sometimes the smallest gift carries the biggest secret. Sometimes those laughing at you are standing on ground about to crumble beneath their feet. If you've ever been the one left out, the one who didn't match the family portrait, the one who had to choose between being invited or being real, this story is for you. Subscribe to Heart Stories for more true tales of resilience, identity, and the quiet power of choosing yourself. The Mitchell estate felt suffocating as Ethan stood among designer suits and whispered condolences. The mahogany-paneled room where William had negotiated his biggest deals now hosted his final business transaction. Blake adjusted his Rolex for the 5th time in 10 minutes, while Madison's eyes remained dry behind Gucci sunglasses. Uncle Richard stood with the confidence of a man about to be crowned, his wife Linda already scrolling through Hampton's property renovators on her phone. William discussed the succession plan with me extensively, Richard announced to the room. Though everyone knew it was a lie, William Mitchell never discussed business outside the office, and he certainly never promised anything to anyone. But Richard had spent months telling investors he would take over as CEO, with Blake as his right hand. The Mitchell legacy, he assured them, was secure. Ethan sat alone in the back row, the gap between him and his family wider than the physical space suggested. The lawyer's voice cut through whispered speculation, his reading of the will precise and emotionless. As expected, the company shares went to Blake, the Manhattan penthouse to Madison, the Hamptons estate to Richard and Linda. Their satisfied expressions turned to confusion when the lawyer reached the final bequest. And to my grandson, Ethan Mitchell, I leave this envelope and its contents. The simplicity of it silenced the room. Ethan accepted the envelope with his steady hands, though his heart raced. Inside, a one-way ticket to San Francisco. A business card with Chronicle Building, 3 p.m., June 15th, scrawled on the back, and an old brass key. The silence lasted precisely 3 seconds before Blake's laughter cracked it open. A coach ticket. That's perfect. Madison pulled out her phone, clearly contemplating whether this was Instagram-worthy. Maybe Grandpa finally accepted you're never going to be a real Mitchell. Linda's voice dripped with manufactured sympathy. William always said you lacked business acumen. At least he gave you something nice. San Francisco has a community for people like you. Sarah, who had been silent throughout the proceedings, finally stood. Is there anything else, Mr. Harwick? Her voice carried the quiet dignity Ethan had inherited from her. There is a personal letter for Ethan, to be opened only upon his arrival in San Francisco. The lawyer replied, closing his leather portfolio with finality. A letter, Richard's voice mixed amusement with suspicion. What's it going to say? Sorry you're poor. Enjoy the gay bars. The ride home with Sarah was quiet. Rain streaked the windows of her modest sedan, so different from the luxury vehicles the other Mitchells drove away in. I'm going, Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. William called me last month. He didn't say much, just that I should support whatever decision you made after the funeral. Back in their apartment, James listened intently as Ethan explained everything. His artist perspective saw what others missed. There's something there. Ethan, why San Francisco specifically? Why the Chronicle Building? And what does that key open? That night, Ethan remembered his final chess game with William 2 weeks before his death. The old man had seemed different, softer somehow, as if he'd finally removed a mask he'd worn for decades. Ethan, he'd said, moving his knight in an unfamiliar pattern. What do you know about trust? It's earned, not given. Ethan had answered, repeating the Mitchell family mantra. No, boy. William's eyes, sharp despite his age, had fixed on him. Real trust is knowing when to follow without understanding why. Your father knew that. He trusted me with something once, something precious, and I failed him. But you're different. You don't want anything from me. I never have, grandfather. I know. That's why when the time comes, you'll trust me, even when everyone else thinks you're a fool. Now, holding the plane ticket, those words felt less like memory and more like instruction. The next morning, Ethan arranged for a substitute teacher at his high school. His principal wasn't happy about the sudden request, but Ethan had never taken a personal day in 5 years. As he packed a single carry-on, James watched from the doorway. The way I see it, he left them what they wanted, the appearance of wealth, and saved something different for you. Perhaps that was it. Perhaps William had seen something in him that the others couldn't or wouldn't see. The ability to look beyond appearances, beyond expectations, and find what truly mattered. Like the history Ethan taught his students, the most important moments often look like nothing when they're happening. The plane's wheels touched down at San Francisco International Airport precisely on schedule. Ethan's legs ached from the cramped economy seat, his back stiff from 6 hours of recycled air and narrow space. The California sunshine streaming through the windows felt foreign after Boston's perpetual gray, as if he'd landed on a different planet rather than the opposite coast. Immigration was a blur of tired faces and routine questions. Purpose of visit? Ethan almost laughed. How could he explain what he himself didn't understand? He mumbled something about family business, which wasn't entirely untrue. The arrivals hall bustled with reunions, families embracing, business travelers efficiently collecting luggage, tourists already mapping adventures on smartphones. Ethan stood still in the current of movement, suddenly aware of how little he had prepared for whatever came next. Then he saw a professionally printed sign reading Ethan Mitchell, held by a weathered man in his late 60s, military posture evident despite his age. Mr. Mitchell. The man's voice carried the slight rasp of someone who had once barked orders. Name's Michael Donovan. Your grandfather arranged everything. You knew my grandfather. 40 years. Michael took Ethan's bag before he could protest. Name, 69. We kept in touch. The black SUV waiting outside wasn't ostentatious like Uncle Richard's collection, but its quiet luxury spoke of quality over display. As they merged into traffic, Ethan noticed a small rainbow pin on Michael's collar, subtle but unmistakable. William mentioned you were family, Michael said, eyes meeting Ethan's in the rearview mirror. My son is too. Gay. William helped me understand when I couldn't, saved my relationship with my boy. Ethan's perception of his grandfather fractured and reformed. William Mitchell, patriarch, traditionalist, military man, had helped a fellow veteran accept his gay son. The William he knew, and the William being described couldn't possibly be the same person. Instead of heading directly to the Chronicle building, Michael drove through the city, pointing out landmarks William had apparently loved. They passed through the Castro district, its rainbow flags waving in the breeze, its streets alive with a community Ethan had only found in pockets of Boston. He came here every year, Michael explained. For decades, no one in Boston knew. The Chronicle building rose before them, a historic landmark from another era. Inside, a receptionist directed them to a conference room where a woman in her 50s waited with a manila folder. Carol Zhang, Esquire, she introduced herself, offering a firm handshake. Williams, California attorney. I've been instructed to give you this, with directions to only open it when you reach Napa Valley. Another envelope, another instruction, another piece of a puzzle Ethan couldn't yet see. Back in the SUV, they crossed the Golden Gate Bridge, its vermilion spans reaching through the gay like arms stretching towards something better. William changed after Vietnam, Michael said as they drove north. Said he came back with 2 people inside him, the man his father raised and the man the war made him see. Spent most of his life being the first one in Boston. Only let the second one live here. The landscape transformed as they drove, urban density giving way to rolling hills, then vineyards that stretched toward the horizon in perfect, undulating rows. The Mitchell estate in Boston was all sharp angles and imposing stone. Here, the land itself seemed to breathe. Almost there, Michael said as they turned onto a private road lined with olive trees. Mitchell Vineyards. At the end of the drive stood a craftsman-style home, large but welcoming, with wide porches and warm cedar siding. Nothing like the cold mansion Ethan had grown up visiting. Before the car fully stopped, the front door opened, and a man about 45 stepped out. His face carried the unmistakable Mitchell jawline, though his casual clothing and relaxed posture were unfamiliar to Ethan's understanding of family. "Welcome to Napa," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm David Mitchell. William was my great-uncle. He said you'd come." Inside, the house was filled with natural light and comfortable furnishings. Photos lined the walls, William in settings Ethan had never seen, smiling more freely than he could remember. In many pictures, William stood with a diverse group of people, arms around shoulders, wine glasses raised in toast. "You look confused," David noted, pouring 2 glasses of deep red wine. "William guessed you would be." I don't understand any of this, Ethan admitted, accepting the glass. The William Mitchell I knew wouldn't set foot in a place like the Castro. He built weapons systems. He voted Republican. David's laugh was genuine. The William Mitchell you knew was half the man. This wine tasted. The flavor was complex, rich with notes of blackberry and something earthy Ethan couldn't name. It's extraordinary. Mitchell Vineyards Cabernet, 2018. Award-winning, sustainable, built from nothing over 30 years. Just like his company in Boston. Except nobody there knows this place exists. David gestured for Ethan to open the envelope from Carol Zhang. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. Play me alone. Later, in a sun-filled room that had apparently been prepared for his arrival, Ethan connected the drive to the provided laptop. William's face filled the screen, older than Ethan remembered, but somehow younger in spirit. The perpetual tension around his eyes replaced with something like peace. The video began without preamble, William's voice stronger than it had been in his final weeks. Ethan, if you're watching this, then you trusted me enough to take the flight. Good. You always were the only one who understood that some things matter more than appearances. William shifted slightly, the vineyard visible through windows behind him. Your cousins got what they always wanted from me, the appearance of success. But appearances can be deceiving. His familiar half-smile emerged, the one Ethan had seen across countless chess matches. Mitchell Technologies has been hemorrhaging money for 3 years. I've hidden it in the books. But Blake is about to inherit a disaster. The Manhattan penthouse has 3 mortgages. The Hamptons estate, the bank owns 70% of it. Ethan's hand covered his mouth, shock radiating through him. The Mitchell empire, the source of family pride. The reason for Blake's arrogance and Madison's entitlement was a facade. I gave them exactly what they showed me. They valued hollow prizes that look golden from the outside. William leaned closer to the camera. But you, Ethan, you visited me every Sunday just to play chess. Never asked for anything. Never angled for position. You chose teaching over money because you wanted purpose. So I'm giving you what you never asked for: truth, family, and yes, wealth that actually matters. William explained how he'd built Mitchell Vineyards after returning from Vietnam, seeking peace he couldn't find in Boston. This land produces 2 million bottles a year. The vineyard has been certified organic for 15 years. Your Uncle David has been running operations, waiting to meet you. This place is valued at $50 million. Ethan, no mortgages, no debt, real value. Not the illusion I allowed Boston to see. The revelation left Ethan breathless. For years, he'd accepted being the family disappointment, the teacher among executives, the gay man in a traditional family. Now he discovered that the success he'd been measured against wasn't real. One more thing, William continued. David is like you, gay. Disowned by his father, my nephew, 30 years ago. I found him working at a bar in the Castro, sleeping on friends' couches. Brought him here, gave him purpose. He's family, Ethan, real family. Not the kind that poses for Christmas cards, but the kind that stands beside you when it matters. William paused, that familiar strategic look returning. Blake will call within a month, begging for help. Be kinder to him than he was to you. That's what makes you better. Checkmate, my boy. The screen went dark. Ethan sat motionless, processing everything. Outside the window, rows of grapevines stretched toward mountains painted gold by the setting sun. This was his inheritance, not just land and business, but truth. David was waiting in the kitchen, a simple dinner prepared. He wanted to tell you himself, he explained, setting down plates of locally sourced food. William was complicated. The man Boston knew rigid. Traditional, that was his father speaking through him. The man we knew here was different. Over dinner, David shared stories of William's other life, how he'd created a sanctuary where people could be authentic, how the vineyard had become home to those who needed one, former military who couldn't readjust, LGBTQ+ folks rejected by families, artists and dreamers who valued creation over consumption. He built this place with his heart, not just his hands, David explained. Every worker has health insurance. Everyone earns living wages. We donate to LGBTQ+ youth programs. William Mitchell was a different man in California. That night, unable to sleep, Ethan wandered the property. Under moonlight, the vineyard looked like a living tapestry, each vine connected to others in long, purposeful rows. Near a small pond, he found a chess table made of stone, 2 chairs waiting. He sat there every evening. Came a voice behind him. A woman, perhaps 60, approached, her work clothes suggesting practical concerns over fashion. Playing against himself mostly. Said he was practicing for Sundays. You knew about me, Ethan asked. Angela Ramirez, head winemaker. 20 years here, she extended calloused hands. William talked about you constantly. His grandson, the teacher who chose meaning over money. He was prouder of you than you know. The next morning, David took Ethan on a tour of operations. The technology was impressive, sophisticated, yet sustainable. Workers greeted them warmly, many embracing David like family. In the main processing building, Ethan noticed a framed photo of his father, Robert, much younger than he remembered, standing beside William among the vines. Your father knew about this place, David confirmed. He visited twice yearly. William hoped he'd bridge the 2 worlds someday, but then Robert died suddenly. Heart attack, right? At his desk. Ethan nodded. Working on contracts for Uncle Richard. David's expression darkened. Richard knew Robert was ill, kept pushing anyway. Your father was the best of them. Ethan, he left you a letter. William kept it safe. The envelope was yellowed with age, his father's handwriting achingly familiar. Inside, a single page. Son, there's another way to live than what you see in Boston. Dad's building something real in California, something authentic. I hope to show you someday. Until then, be who you are. The world has enough people pretending. Ethan's phone rang that evening. Blake's name flashing on the screen. He answered to hear his cousin's voice stripped of its usual confidence. Ethan, it's Blake. We need to talk. The company's bankrupt. The accountants found everything. Dad's losing the house. Madison's penthouse was foreclosed yesterday. It's all gone. After a pause, Blake continued, his voice breaking. Grandfather left you something real, didn't he? Ethan stood among the vines as dawn broke over Napa Valley, painting the mountains in shades of amber and rose. 3 weeks had passed since he'd answered Blake's desperate call. 3 weeks of learning about soil composition, fermentation processes, and the delicate balance of running a vineyard. 3 weeks of discovering the grandfather he never truly knew. The night before, he'd called James. I want you to see this place, he'd said softly into the phone. I want you to meet the family I never knew I had. Now, walking between rows of Cabernet Sauvignon with David, Ethan contemplated the offer he would make his Boston family. Not from obligation, but from understanding what William had truly wanted. Your grandfather wasn't building this place as revenge, David said, seeming to read Ethan's thoughts. He built it as redemption, for himself, for the years he spent living behind a mask. He wanted to give everyone a second chance, even those who might not deserve it. Back at the main house, Ethan drafted emails to Blake, Madison, Richard, and Linda. The terms were clear. Blake and Madison could come work at the vineyard, learning from the ground up, no executive titles. Richard and Linda would receive enough to start over modestly a small apartment, basic necessities, but nothing more. The Mitchell Technologies patents would be restructured under the vineyard's umbrella, salvaging jobs but not prestige. James arrived that afternoon, his artist's eyes widening at the landscape. Ethan watched his partner absorb everything: the sprawling vines, the warmth of the workers' community, the authenticity that permeated every corner of Mitchell Vineyards. It suits you, James said finally, squeezing Ethan's hand. This place, these people, you seem complete here. A week later, Blake and Madison arrived, subdued versions of their former selves. Gone were the designer clothes and entitled attitudes, replaced by uncertainty and humility born from loss. Ethan met them at the small local airport, driving the vineyard's worn pickup truck rather than the luxury vehicles they might have expected. "I thought you'd gloat," Blake admitted as they drove through the valley. "I would have, if our positions were reversed." "That's why our positions aren't reversed," Ethan replied simply. Madison wept when she saw the vineyard, not from disappointment but recognition. "Grandfather loved this place. Didn't he actually loved it, not just owned it?" "He did," Ethan confirmed. "And he built it for all of us, whether we knew it or not." Over the following months, transformation came slowly but steadily. Blake discovered an aptitude for sustainable farming practices. Madison's marketing skills, once used for self-promotion, found purpose in telling the vineyard's authentic story. Even Richard and Linda, starting over in a modest New Jersey apartment, began building lives based on substance rather than appearance. Sarah moved into a small cottage on the property, finally retiring from nursing. Her garden flourished beside the vineyard rows, her hands healing plants instead of people. She and Angela became fast friends, two strong women who recognized each other's resilience. One evening, as sunset gilded the valley, Ethan and James hosted dinner on the wide porch. Around the table sat their newly expanded family, David and his partner, Angela and her children, Blake and his new girlfriend, a local teacher, Madison now inseparable from her camera. Documenting the vineyard seasons, Michael came too, bringing his son and son-in-law. "A toast," David proposed, raising a glass of their award-winning Cabernet. "To William, who saw beyond appearances to what matters." "To second chances," added Blake, humility still new but genuine in his voice. "To family," Ethan concluded, "not just the one we're born into, but the one we build together." Later, in the quiet of evening, Ethan found the stone chess table by the pond. There, he uncorked the final bottle William had personally produced. The label read Legacy, and beneath it, in his grandfather's handwriting, "The true inheritance isn't what you're given, but what you're trusted to continue." Ethan poured 2 glasses, placing one opposite himself, a gesture to the grandfather he'd known and the one he was still discovering. The man who had lived 2 lives, but in the end, had found a way to make them whole. If you've ever felt caught between worlds, torn between who you are and who others expect you to be, remember that authenticity leaves a legacy far more valuable than any fortune. Have you ever discovered unexpected truth in your family's story? Share your experience in the comments below. For more stories of resilience and redemption, subscribe to Heart Stories, because sometimes the most powerful journey is the one that leads you home to yourself.